I killed 37 men with my bare hands. Not because I wanted to, but because a white man decided my survival was worth more than their lives. I still hear the last one, the way his body hit the swamp mud, the way the torches flickered when the rifles lifted behind me. They wanted to kill me that night. Not in the ring, but after it. If you're hearing my voice now, it's because the people who own my body never wanted my truth spoken out loud. Before I continue, subscribe to this channel and tell me where you're listening from. What I'm about to tell you was never written in their books. They erased my name. But they couldn't erase the 37 ghosts that followed me. Tell me, if freedom demanded blood, not theirs but yours, how far would you go? I don't remember my real birthday. Most enslaved people didn't. Our lives began when someone wrote a number beside a name they chose for us, like labeling a crate. But I remember something else. The first time a grown man looked at me with fear, not pity. I was 8 when it happened. A cold morning in the Carolinas. Thin frost on the fields. I carried a bucket of feed that should have taken 2 boys to lift. I didn't think about strength back then. It was the only thing they hadn't stolen from me yet. The overseer, Mr. Hale, watched me from the fence. He squinted, whispered to another man, and I saw the look they gave each other. Not pride. Not surprise. Fear. Fear of what a child like me would become. They started testing me after that. More weight. Longer hours. Harder tasks. Every day felt like they were trying to see if I'd break. But children can survive things grown men cannot. Pain becomes part of the skin. Hunger becomes normal. Silence becomes home. My mother used to say strength was a curse in a place like ours. It drew eyes. It drew anger. It drew profit. But I only understood what she meant years later. Back then, I didn't know the world outside our fields. I didn't know how prices were calculated, how bodies were measured like horseflesh, how skilled hands were worth less than a strong back. I only knew that my mother prayed every night for me to stay small, or at least quiet. But nothing about me stayed small. By the time I was 14, I stood taller than most grown men. Broad shoulders. Thick hands. You would think the other enslaved men envied it. They didn't. They feared it too, but for different reasons. Strength made me a threat to white men. And a target for them. I learned early that when someone stronger suffers, the weak suffer with them. So I kept my voice low. I kept my head down. I learned to move like a shadow with a giant's body. But silence didn't protect me the day it finally happened. It was January 1841. I remember the sky. It was the dull white color it gets before snow. An old man named Henry was struggling with a broken wheel near the barn. He was nearly 60. His back curved like a question mark. Mr. Hale came by, furious that the wagon wasn't fixed yet, and started yelling. Henry apologized. He always apologized. But that day Hale wanted something more than obedience. He wanted entertainment. He swung his whip without warning. The crack sliced the air and bit into Henry's shoulder. The old man fell, one hand raised as if that could stop the next lash. I stepped in front of him without thinking. Just a step. Just my body between him and pain. Hale's face twisted. A boy didn't block a white man's whip. Not in that world. Not ever. I felt the next strike before I heard it. The leather snapped across my chest, but I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't give him what he wanted. He hit me again. Then again. Each blow felt like fire. But something inside me, something cold and old, held me still. When he finally stopped, he wasn't satisfied. He was terrified. Because I didn't fall. I should have been punished worse for it. Maybe even killed. But that night, something happened that changed everything. A trader from Louisiana arrived at the plantation. He saw my back, saw how the lashes carved red lines but didn't break me, saw my size, my age, my silence. He made an offer to my owner. I didn't hear the price that night. But I heard the footsteps outside the cabin. The hushed voices. The shifting tone from anger to opportunity. The next morning, my mother wouldn't look at me. She kept folding the same shirt over and over, hands trembling. "Pack it," she whispered. "You're sold." Sold. A small word. A word that sounded like a door closing forever. I asked her where I was going. She didn't know. They never told us. They just took us. Moved us like tools from one field to another. But deep down I felt it. Like a chill in the spine. Like the moment before lightning strikes. Whatever waited for me in the South was darker than anything I'd known. That night, when she thought I was asleep, I heard her crying. Her voice cracked like breaking wood. I wanted to tell her I'd be okay. But I didn't believe that myself. I left before sunrise. A rope around my wrists. 2 men on horseback beside me. When the plantation faded behind the trees, I realized something. I wasn't born for a life. I I was born for a purpose someone else had already written for me. They didn't buy me to work. They bought me to fight. And in the years that followed, 37 men would pay that price with their lives. 1830s Carolina. One child too strong to break. One whip that didn't make him fall. And a road leading deeper into the darkness. Would you have stood in front of Henry? Or kept your head down to stay alive? The journey south felt like falling into a hole that had no bottom. The men who escorted me didn't speak, except to curse at the horse or spit tobacco. I walked with my wrists tied, my ankles raw from the rope. Every mile took me farther from the little life I knew, my mother's voice, Henry's cracked laugh, the hymn we whispered on Sundays. The road bent toward the ports of New Orleans, and the air changed before the city even appeared. Thick heat, heavy marsh smell, buzzing insects that never slept. It felt like the land itself warned me, turn back, run. Don't go where they're taking you. But I couldn't run with wrists tied and guns at my back. When we reached the city, the noise hit me first. Carriages, shouting, wheels grinding stone, buyers arguing over prices. The slave auction sat right in the center like a rotten tooth in a beautiful smile. Men in fine coats, women with lace gloves, merchants wiping sweat with silk cloths. They all gathered to watch human beings lifted onto wooden blocks like livestock. My turn came before I had time to think. They pushed me up the steps. My shirt was taken. Hands grabbed my shoulders, my jaw, my arms. A man pried open my mouth like I was a horse checking my teeth. Another tapped the welts on my chest from Hale's whip. One buyer whistled low. Look at the size of him, he said. Barely a man yet. I stared past all of them at the sky. It was a gray day. Clouds swollen like they were holding back a storm. Then I saw him. Charles Marshan. Not tall. Not loud. Not cruel-looking. Cruel men usually enjoyed their own cruelty. Marshan's danger wasn't in his smile. It was in the way he studied me. Slow. Calm. Measuring something no one else cared to measure. The auctioneer bragged about my strength, my size, my potential. People laughed. Someone muttered about breeding. Another said I'd make a fine field mule. But Marshan didn't laugh. He stepped closer, looked at my hands, then right into my eyes. That was the first moment I realized he wasn't buying me to pick cotton. He raised his hand at the opening bid. Others tried to outprice him. He didn't flinch. $800 later, the gavel hit the block. Sold. And I belonged to him. He didn't speak on the ride back to the plantation. Not until the sun dipped low and the marsh turned gold under the wagon. What's your name? He asked. Samuel, I said. You strong-willed? Not angry. Not mocking. Just curious. I didn't answer. He gave a small nod. Good. Good. That word chilled me more than Hale's whip ever had. By the time we reached St. Landry Parish, night had swallowed the fields. The Marshan plantation rose out of the dark like a white ghost, big house glowing with lanterns, sugar fields stretching far as the eye could see, a mill clanking in the distance. He sent me to the stables, not the fields. The other enslaved workers stared. Stables were for trusted men, obedient men. Not me. Silas, an older man with silver in his beard, whispered while showing me the horse stalls. Watch him close, he said. Marshan studies a man before he breaks him. But Marshan didn't try to break me. He watched. Every day. From the fence. From the stable door. From the porch of the big house. For 3 weeks he said nothing. Just observed. I felt his eyes on me like weight. Like he was waiting for proof of something he already believed. Then it happened. Dutch Keller, the overseer with a temper like wildfire, came stomping into the stable because a saddle wasn't polished enough. He grabbed the whip at his belt and swung before I even turned. Instinct made my hand shoot up. I caught his wrist mid-swing. Silas froze. The horses went silent. Keller's face twisted red. The whip in a slave's hand meant death. He opened his mouth to shout for help. But Marshan appeared in the doorway before the word came out. Leave, he said. Keller blinked. Sir, I said leave. The overseer's jaw worked like he wanted to argue, but something in Marshan's eyes stopped him cold. He backed away, muttering curses, his pride bleeding behind him. When he left, it was just me and Marshan. He stepped closer. Not angry. Not surprised. Almost satisfied. I know what you are, he said. I stayed silent. You're not a worker. You're not a stable hand. You won't be broken. He paused. And I won't waste time trying. His next words carved cold into my bones. I'm going to make you an offer, Samuel. Not a request. A truth. He told me about the fights, secret rings in the woods where wealthy men watched their slaves beat each other to death. Told me how much money they made. Told me how powerful men traveled miles just to gamble on blood. Then he told me the part that made my fists tighten. If you refuse, he said, the people you've spoken to since you arrived, Dinah in the kitchen, Silas in the stables, the boy named Marcus who follows you, will be punished. Sold. Destroyed. He listed the ways. Slow. Clinical. Clear. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't threaten me with his own hands. He let the system threaten them for him. And in that moment he wasn't a man. He was a door closing behind me. But if you fight, he said, and if you win, they will be protected. He let silence fill the stable like smoke. So tell me, Samuel, will you fight? It wasn't a choice. It was a sentence. 1847 Louisiana. One plantation. One offer made in the dark. A path forced by fear, not of death but of losing the only people who cared if I lived. Would you have taken the deal? Or let the ones you loved suffer for your refusal? The day of my first fight didn't feel real. It felt like walking toward a storm that had been chasing me since the day I was born. November 14, 1847. I remember the cold morning air and how the fields smelled of wet sugarcane and smoke. I didn't speak. None of us spoke. Even the horses pulling Martian's wagon seemed uneasy, snorting, stamping, refusing to settle. We left the road and cut into the woods, following a narrow path only men like Marzhan were meant to know. Torches already flickered between the trees, glowing like angry eyes. And then the clearing opened before us. It wasn't an arena. It wasn't even a ring. It was a patch of dirt, circled by men who had never worked a single day the way we did. Rich boots dug into the mud while their laughter floated on the cold air. They passed whiskey, placed wagers, watched the enslaved fighters like wolves circling cattle. This was their entertainment, our lives in their hands. Marzhan leaned close to me as we approached the center. Remember what I told you, he said softly. You win, they live. Dinah's face flashed in my mind. Little Marcus's laugh. Silas's warnings. I nodded, though fear twisted inside my gut. Then I saw him, my first opponent. Jupiter. A huge man with scars across his chest and arms like claw marks from another life. His face held no expression. Just a cold emptiness. He'd seen this ring before. He'd buried men in it. Rousel, his owner, smirked at me like I was a lamb being thrown to a lion. Boy strong, someone whispered behind me. Won't matter, another answered. Jupiter kills quick. A voice announced the rules as if rules mattered in a place like that. No weapons. No interference. Fight until one man cannot stand. But everyone knew what couldn't be said aloud. Fight until one man dies. When they stepped back, the world went silent. Even the wind stopped through the trees. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. I could hear Jupiter breathing across the ring. Then something inside me clicked. A coldness, a stillness, a place I would visit too many times in the years to come. Jupiter moved first. He came fast for a man his size. His fist crashed into my ribs so hard it lifted me from the ground. Pain shot through my chest, sharp and hot. Another blow split the skin above my eye. I tasted blood, my own. He kept coming, relentless. Every strike felt like it might break something. Maybe it did. But I didn't fall. I don't know if it was fear or anger or something older than both that made me fight back. My first punch landed on his jaw and I felt the shock travel through my arm. He blinked, surprised. The next punch hit his ribs. Then another. And another. We traded like that. His experience against my size. His fury against my desperation. His skill against my promise to protect the ones Marzhan held hostage. Minutes blurred. Blows blurred. Blood blurred. The torches swayed. Men shouted. I heard gamblers yelling odds. I heard Rousel screaming Jupiter's name. Then Jupiter staggered. For the first time I saw doubt in his eyes. A flicker of fear. That second changed everything. I pressed forward. He punched. I punched harder. He tried to dodge. I didn't let him. My fists became a rhythm, heavy, brutal, driven by something deeper than strength. A need to end this before the price was paid by someone else. Jupiter's legs buckled. He dropped to one knee, then both. He blinked up at me with a strange resignation, like he'd known this end was waiting for him long before this night. I didn't want to kill him. God knows I didn't. But in that ring, mercy was a death sentence for me and for the people who depended on me staying alive. So I raised my fist, and I brought it down. The sound it made against his skull is something I've never forgotten. A dull, final crack that echoed through the trees and froze every man watching. Jupiter collapsed forward and didn't move again. The clearing exploded with noise. Cheers, curses, men collecting money, Men screaming they'd lost everything. To them it was just a game. Another bet won or lost. To me it was the first ghost I'd carry. A ghost I still see in the dark. I stood there, chest heaving, blood in my eyes, my hands shaking. But not from the fight. From the realization that I had crossed a line I could never return from. Marshan walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder, not with kindness but with ownership. "Well done," he said quietly. "You did what you had to." Did I? I wasn't sure then. I'm still not sure now. That night, when the others slept, I washed my hands in the trough behind the stables. The water turned red, then pink, then clear again. But no matter how long I scrubbed, they still felt stained. And they stayed that way. Because Jupiter was only the first. 1847, Louisiana woods. One dead man. One new monster being shaped. And a promise made in blood to protect the innocent by destroying the guilty. If you were in that ring, would you have swung the last blow, or let fate decide your life for you? After Jupiter, the fights didn't stop. They multiplied. Once a man proves he can kill and still come back to work the next day, the men who own him stop seeing him as human. They see him as prophet. Word spread fast among the planters. Marshan had a fighter. A big one. A reliable one. One who didn't break. They started sending letters. Then invitations. Then demands. The second fight happened just 3 weeks after the first. Then the third a month later. The names of my opponents blur now. Cain, Moses, Eli, Red Tom, Moses again but a different man, Abel, Jonah. They all came into the ring with reputations. Mean as a bull. Quick as a snake. Has killed 3 men. Has never fallen. But money has a cruel way of convincing men that every legend is just another bet waiting to be tested. The rings changed. Sometimes a clearing in the woods. Sometimes behind an abandoned barn. Sometimes near a riverbank where the mud swallowed blood before sunrise. But the rules never changed. No weapons. No escape. Fight until one man can't get up. Sometimes they died right there at my feet. Sometimes they died days later, their lungs filling with blood, their skulls swelling against their skin. Either way, the ground didn't care. Took them the same. I tried not to learn their stories. It was easier that way. Easier to think of them as opponents, not fathers, brothers, sons. Not men who once laughed in some cabin the way we did on Sunday evenings. Not men who prayed for relief the same way I did. But you can't stand inches from someone and not see they're just like you. You can see fear in their eyes. Hope. Resignation. Sometimes anger. I remember one man, Thomas, from a plantation 2 parishes over. We stood in the ring, the torchlight catching the sweat on his face. He leaned in close before the first punch and whispered, "My wife's watching." I didn't ask which one she was. Didn't look for her in the crowd. I couldn't afford to. If I saw her face, I might pull my punches. And pulling my punches meant Dinah, Silas, and Marcus would pay. So I fought Thomas the way I fought everyone else. Hard, fast, precise, like the devil himself had his hand on my shoulder guiding every strike. He went down in 9 minutes. He didn't get back up. Later that night, when I lay on my pallet staring at the ceiling of my cabin, I heard a woman sobbing somewhere out in the dark. The sound cut through me worse than any broken rib. I didn't know if it was her. I didn't need to know. The sound belonged to all of them. Every fight turned me into something more valuable to Marshan. He tracked everything in a leather journal. Wagers, times, winnings, my injuries. To him, it was numbers. To me, it was ghosts. With each victory, he bought more land. Upgraded the sugar mill. Hired more overseers. His house grew bright with imported furniture and fine glassware. My cabin stayed the same. He did give me some things. Better food, cleaner clothes, my own space, time away from the fields. He made sure the others knew I had special privileges. He wanted them to see I wasn't like them anymore. That was the cruelest cut of all. Because the truth was I was still a slave. Just a dressed up one. Some of the others admired me. Some avoided me. Some were afraid to stand too close as if my curse could rub off on them. Once, a young man from the cane fields asked me, "How does it feel to never lose?" I looked at my hands. At the scars. At the broken knuckles that never healed right. "I lose every time," I said. He didn't understand then. Maybe he does now wherever he is. By the time I had fought 10 men, the fights felt less like events and more like routines. We would travel at night. Arrive at some hidden place. I'd step into the ring. Rich men would hedge their fear with jokes and liquor. Another enslaved man would stand across from me, knowing either he or I would not see another sunrise. I learned to move differently. To take a hit without letting it control my body. To strike where it hurt most, ribs, jaw, neck, temple. To end things faster when I could. The worst fights were the ones that took too long, where both of us staggered, half-blind, covered in blood and sweat, held up only by will and stubbornness. Once, after a long brutal fight, my opponent, a man named Elias, leaned against me as he fell, his face inches from my ear. "Don't let them enjoy it," he whispered. That was the last thing he ever said. It stayed with me. So I started changing how I fought. I stopped putting on a show. I stopped letting the fights drag out. If I saw an opening that would end it quick, I took it. The planters didn't like that at first. Short fights meant less fun. But my reputation grew with every win. The Bayou Giant. The man who doesn't fall. The undefeated. They bragged about me at their tables, in their parlors, in their letters. I wasn't Samuel anymore. I was a story they told each other while sipping expensive whiskey. Meanwhile, among the enslaved, a different story grew. They whispered my name in the quarters. Some said seeing me stand after every beating meant maybe they could stand after theirs. Some told their children that I couldn't be killed, that I had something on my side the masters didn't understand. I didn't feel invincible. I felt trapped in a body that wouldn't quit. Every dawn I woke with new aches. Old scars burned before rain. My hands swelled at night. But I kept walking back into those rings. Because every time I won, I could look at Dinah, Silas, and Marcus and know they were still there. Still breathing. Still safe for now. 1848 to 1849. Swamps and clearings. 11 more men buried. One man turned into a legend on purpose, by people who never planned for what legends can do. Tell me, if the only way to protect your people was to become the monster they needed, would you let the world call you that? By the time the 20th fight came, I thought I had seen every kind of man the South could throw at me. Big men. Fast men. Wild men. Men who fought like they had nothing to lose. Men who fought like they still believed someone was coming to save them. But I had never met a man like Cato. The fight was set for April 23, 1849. A plantation near Krotz Springs, far enough from town that the sheriff pretended not to notice the wagons leaving after dark. Torches lined the clearing like the teeth of some animal waiting to swallow us. I had fought 19 times. 19 victories. 14 dead. But that night, something felt different, like the air itself was warning me. The moment Cato stepped into the ring, I understood why. He wasn't bigger than me, but he moved differently, like someone who'd been taught, not just thrown into fights. 4. Timing. A calm face that didn't blink at the crowd's jeers. He rolled his shoulders like a trained boxer. His owner, Thorne, bragged behind him. Killed 6 men in Georgia before I brought him here. Tonight, he kills 7. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. When the ringmaster dropped his arm, Cato came at me with speed I didn't see coming. His fist struck my ribs so hard I heard a sound. Not from his hand, but from inside me. Crack. Pain shot through my entire side. My breath caught. The world tilted. He didn't give me time to recover. A second punch slammed into my jaw. A third into my shoulder. My vision blurred. The torches smeared into long streaks of orange. For the first time, real fear coiled in my stomach. I had faced death before, but this felt different. This felt like meeting someone who understood exactly how to dismantle a body like mine. I stepped back, trying to breathe without the pain stabbing deeper. He didn't let me. A fourth punch. Then a fifth. Every strike felt calculated, like he was reading me, waiting for mistakes, watching how I favored my right side. He found my weakness before I did. When his fist hit my ribs again, I dropped to one knee. The crowd roared. Some men cheered. Many laughed. I heard Thorne shout, "End him now." Marsan went pale. He knew what it meant if I fell. If I lost, Dinah, Silas, and Marcus would pay the price. I saw Marcus's face in my mind, his wide eyes, the way he followed me around the stables when he thought I wasn't looking. I tasted blood, felt the dirt under my fingers, heard the crowd chanting Cato's name. Something cold settled inside me. Not anger, not fear, clarity. I pushed off the ground. Cato looked surprised, just for a moment, but in a fight like this, a moment is a lifetime. He threw another punch. This time I didn't dodge. I stepped into it. The blows smashed into my cheek. My head snapped back. But I didn't fall. I let the pain wash over me. Let my body absorb it, accept it, bury it. Then I hit him. One punch to the ribs. A second to the jaw. A third to the temple. He stumbled. I stepped in close, crowd forgotten, pain forgotten, everything forgotten except survival. His blows kept coming. Fast, sharp, trained. But mine came heavier. Each one fueled by something deeper than muscle. I heard someone shout, "He's turning the tide." Someone else yelled, "Cato." Block. Block. But Cato's eyes changed. Fear. For the first time. He tried to retreat, create space, recover. But I didn't let him. They wanted a show. I gave them hell. I hammered him in the ribs, the collarbone, the side of his head. Every punch felt like breaking stone. But he still stood. That was the terrifying part. I'd hit countless men like that before. They always wavered. Cato held on. It became a war of will. His training. Against my reason to live. He threw a last desperate swing. Wild, heavy, unbalanced. I caught his arm. Pulled him forward. Drove my fist into the side of his skull with everything left in me. The sound. That awful hollow sound. Told the truth. He fell before he knew he was falling. Collapsed hard. Lay still. Silence swallowed the clearing. Men who'd come to cheer violence now stared like they'd just seen a ghost rise from the grave. My ribs screamed. My head throbbed. My vision blurred again. But I was standing. Marshan walked toward me, collecting the winnings with trembling hands. He stopped in front of me and whispered, almost frightened. You could have finished him sooner. I wiped the blood from my mouth and answered. I was teaching him something. Marshan frowned. Teaching who? I looked around at the crowd. The planters. The gamblers. The enslaved men who watched in silence. The ones who would carry this story to other plantations by morning. All of them, I said. He didn't understand. Not then. Maybe not ever. But I understood something that night. Cato didn't just break my ribs. He opened my eyes. These fights weren't only about survival anymore. They were about learning. Listening. Taking back pieces of power in the only place the system let me move freely. April 1849. A broken rib. A silent clearing. One man rises when he should have fallen. And a new purpose is born in the dark. If someone tore you down to the edge of death, would you rise to fight? Or lie there and let the world end you? After Cato, everything changed, but not in the way most people think. Men like Marshan believed that fight made me stronger. It didn't. It made me smarter. Pain teaches faster than any teacher. My ribs healed crooked. My left eye stayed swollen for weeks. My knuckles felt like gravel inside my skin. But while my body struggled, my mind sharpened. Because when I stood back up after Cato's punch, when the planters saw me straighten my spine like nothing could break me, something shifted in their eyes. A flicker of fear. Not fear of my size, they'd always known I was big. Not fear of my fists, I'd proven those enough times. Fear of what they didn't understand. Fear of what they couldn't control. That fear traveled faster than any horse. The fights become lessons. Between April 1849 and September 1850, I fought 12 more times. 12 wins. 10 more dead. Each fight took place in a different hidden spot. A barn outside Opelousas. A swamp clearing near Lafayette. The back of a sugar mill where no sound escaped thick wooden walls. A riverbank where the night water swallowed screams. They changed the ring every time to avoid suspicion, but they didn't realize that every new place taught me something. While I waited inside those torchlit circles, bruised and silent, I listened. Fighters talked. Owners bragged. Overseers complained. Planters argued about debts, land, harvests, rivals, routes, all the things they thought only white men needed to know. They didn't think slaves could understand. They didn't think we listened. They didn't think we remembered. But I did. Every word. Every name. Every weakness. Every way the system held itself together. And every crack inside it. A different kind of reputation. By the time Fight 21 rolled around, nobody looked at me as Samuel anymore. I had become myth. The Bayou Giant. The man who can't be beaten. The one the devil doesn't want. Planters whispered about me like I wasn't standing 5 feet away. Some joked that bullets wouldn't dent me. Some said God himself must have put something inside my bones. The enslaved whispered something different. They didn't call me giant or monster. They called me hope. I didn't like it. Hope is a heavy thing to carry when you're still chained at the wrist. But I understood why they needed it. Most enslaved people had never seen a white man lose. Every day was a reminder of who held the whip, who held the gun, who held the law. Then they saw me step into a ring and defeat every man put in front of me. It wasn't victory they admired. It wasn't blood. It wasn't the cheering. It was the simple fact that someone who looked like them could not be broken. Not by fists. Not by pain. Not by the entire system built to crush us. Some said I had a gift. Some said I had a curse. Some said I had a spirit walking with me. But the truth was simpler. I had a reason to live that was bigger than death. Men start watching me differently. White overseers used to talk down at me like they talked down at everyone. Not anymore. They didn't meet my eyes. They stepped aside when I walked by. They kept their voices low when I was near. Even Keller, the overseer who once tried to whip me in the stables, stopped looking at me like a slave. He looked at me like a problem. A problem he didn't know how to solve. And that bothered men like him more than anything else. The Whisper Network. The enslaved workers were always careful. We had to be. A single wrong whisper could cost a life. But after each fight, more and more people found tiny ways to speak to me. A man sharpening tools would mutter, "Saw you stand tall." A woman carrying laundry would say, "You make our children believe." A boy passing water would whisper, "My daddy said you ain't human, you a message." I didn't know how to answer. I wasn't trying to be a message. I was trying to keep 3 people alive, Dinah, Silas, and Marcus. But something bigger was happening. The stories spread from plantation to plantation. From cane fields to cotton fields. From kitchens to mills. Across the swamps and the riverbanks. Every enslaved worker carried the story a little further. With each telling, the legend grew taller. Some said I'd killed 50 men, not 30. Some said I could see the future. Some said bullets froze in the air when aimed at me. None of that was true. But they weren't really talking about me. They were talking about possibility. They were talking about freedom. Marshan takes notice. Marshan didn't like how much people whispered. He didn't like how much I listened. He didn't like how quiet I had become. He didn't like that his own overseers avoided me. He had built a weapon. But he had not built obedience. Sometimes he watched me from the porch the same way he watched me when I first arrived, studying me, trying to read what he didn't understand. He increased my privileges, better food, a bigger cabin, softer tasks, hoping it would keep me loyal. What he didn't realize was this. A man doesn't become loyal just because the chains get lighter. A man becomes dangerous. Because lighter chains are easier to slip. A new kind of fight. The real fights weren't in the rings anymore. The real fights were the conversations happening between enslaved men and women when white men weren't looking. The real fights were the ideas blooming in people's minds. The real fights were the cracks forming in a system that pretended it could never crack. Every time I stood up after a brutal beating, something inside that system bent. Every time I refused to fall, something inside that system trembled. Every time I won, the whispers grew louder. And somewhere inside me, a voice began to whisper back, "This won't end in the ring. This won't end with victory. This will end when the system breaks before you do." 1849 to 1850. 12 fights. 10 dead. A legend spreading in the dark. And a whisper that scared the men who owned the world. If you lived in that time, would you whisper my name, or stay silent to survive? By the time the 30-second fight came, I thought I'd learned how to bury the guilt. You have to if you want to keep breathing. But guilt has a way of finding new cracks in your soul. Cracks you didn't know were there. The fight that night was against a man named Caesar. A name like a king. A name like a man who'd lived 2 lives already. We met at a plantation near New Iberia, a place where the torches were brighter and the crowd was larger. More than 50 white men in fancy coats who came to bet on death. Caesar wasn't young. He wasn't huge. But his eyes told the story. He had survived 4 fights. He had killed 3 men. And he knew exactly what this ring was. Not a sport. Not entertainment. A grave waiting to be filled. When I stepped into the dirt circle, he didn't posture. Didn't growl. Didn't try to appear fearless. He just looked at me with a quiet question in his eyes. Is this how it ends for both of us? The ringmaster's arm dropped. The fight began in silence. Caesar fought like a man who wanted to live. His punches were sharp, targeted, full of desperation. He struck my injured ribs. He aimed for my jaw. He used every ounce of experience he had. I respected him for that. We traded blow after blow, our breath fogging in the cold night air. He hit hard. I hit harder. He took the pain and kept coming like surviving was the only truth he had left. Minutes felt like hours. At one point, he staggered back, blood running from his nose, and said through clenched teeth, "End it fast. Don't let them enjoy it." His words stopped my breath. I nodded, and I did what he asked. One clean punch to the temple. He dropped before he even knew he was falling. The doctor rushed in, pressed fingers to Caesar's neck, shook his head. The crowd roared like wolves. They didn't mourn him. They didn't see him. To them, he was just a number to settle their bets. But the enslaved workers around the clearing saw everything. They saw Caesar's wife scream into a cloth. They saw 2 men carry his body away like it weighed nothing. They saw the way my hands shook when I stepped back from the ring. Because I didn't feel victory. I felt hollow. The question that split the night. As I moved toward Marshan, A man stepped out from the group of enslaved workers. That alone was dangerous. He could have been shot for it. He was tall, dark-skinned, with a scar across his cheek and fire behind his eyes. His name, I later learned, was Benjamin. He looked straight at me. Not down. Not away. Straight at me, like two free men staring across a line no one else could see. And he asked one question. How many? The overseers stiffened. Some reached for their belts. Speaking to a fighter, especially me, was forbidden. Benjamin didn't flinch. He didn't blink. I answered before anyone could stop me. 32. He nodded slowly, not judging, not afraid. 32, he repeated. And you still here. It wasn't a question. It wasn't praise. It was a truth laid bare in the dirt. He wasn't asking about strength. He was asking about purpose. You killed 32 men and you're still alive? Still standing? Still breathing in a world designed to destroy you? That meant something. To him. To the enslaved people watching. To the overseers who suddenly felt the weight of those eyes. And to me. The moment lasted only a few seconds. The overseers rushed in, pushing Benjamin back, yelling for order. Marshan pulled me away, pale and shaking with adrenaline. But the spark had already been lit. A spark the planters didn't see. A spark they couldn't bury. A spark that didn't belong to me, it belonged to every person who had ever suffered on that soil. The ride back. On the way back to the plantation, Marshan kept glancing at me like he was seeing me for the first time again. The same way he had seen me the day I arrived. You're becoming a problem, he finally said. For who? I asked. For everyone, he whispered. He wasn't wrong. Every fight was supposed to make me more valuable. Instead, it made me more dangerous. Every time I stood up after a brutal beating, the planters lost a little more control. Every time I won, they wondered what kept me alive. Every time the enslaved whispered my name, the system they built shook without them realizing it. Marshan wrote in his journal that night. I saw him scribbling in his study through the window. Samuel wins, but there is something in him now that I do not understand. He is not just surviving. He is sending a message. He didn't know the message wasn't mine. It belonged to Benjamin. To Caesar's widow. To the men who carried broken fighters out of rings. To the children who watched from behind barrels and trees. To the women who whispered prayers into the dark. To every person who saw me stand after every fall. The truth I finally saw. When I lay down that night, sore ribs burning, hands trembling, I realized something important. I wasn't surviving for Dinah, Silas, or Marcus anymore. I was surviving for something bigger. For a truth that terrified white men more than any punch. A system built on fear cannot survive a man who refuses to be afraid. And I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of pain. Not of death. Not of the men who claimed to own my body. The only thing I feared now was what would happen if I stopped standing. 1850. One clearing. One dead man named Caesar. One whispered question that turned a fighter into a symbol. If you saw someone rise after 32 battles, would you follow their example or walk away from the fire? After Caesar's death, the air on Marshan's plantation changed. Not a breeze. Not the weather. Something quieter. A shift you could feel in your bones before you felt it on your skin. The overseers walked heavier, hands always near their belts. The enslaved people whispered faster, passing news through laundry lines, water buckets, and field glances. Marshan grew more restless, pacing the porch every night like a man waiting for a storm that wouldn't tell him when it planned to strike. The fights had gone too far. He knew it. I knew it. Everyone knew it. But the problem with money is this. Once a man tastes fast gold, his soul starts starving for it. And the planters around St. Landry Parish were starving. Guilt or something like it. 3 days after Caesar's fight, Marshan came to the stables. He didn't bring a whip. He didn't bring Keller. He didn't bring that ledger he always clung to. He brought something worse. A look I hadn't seen on him before. Fear. He cleared his throat, tried to stand taller than he felt. I'm ending it, he said. No more fights. No more gatherings. It's gone too far. He looked at me like he wanted me to understand. But he didn't understand the world he had built. Too many men are dying, he continued. Too many whispers. Too many eyes watching. He wasn't talking about the enslaved. He was talking about the planters. Men who wanted more blood. Men who were pushing him. Men who didn't care if I killed or died as long as their bets paid. He rubbed his temples. I'm announcing it next week. The fights are finished. You've done enough. Enough? 32 bodies in the dirt. 32 names wiped from history. 32 men forced into killing me or dying for their owner's entertainment. Enough didn't make sense anymore. But I stayed silent. I wanted to see if he truly meant it. The overseer who wanted to prove something. His decision lasted 4 days. On the 5th, a young overseer named Thomas Gaines arrived. Fresh white shirt, cheap whiskey on his breath, hands eager to hurt something. You can always spot the dangerous ones. They walk with a stiffness like cruelty keeps their bones straight. He watched me muck the stalls for 10 minutes. Then he snapped a riding crop against a post. "You," he said, pointing at me like I wasn't human, "stack that lumber. Now." I kept shoveling. Marzhan had ordered me to rest for the upcoming fight, what he claimed would be the last fight. I followed orders, not for him, but for what I was planning. Gaines didn't care about orders. When I didn't move, he stormed toward me. I said now. He struck me across the shoulder with the crop. Pain burned, but pain was an old friend. I stood, not fast, not aggressive, just stood, and walked away. I didn't look back, didn't give him the satisfaction. He lost his mind. "Stop. Come back. You hear me?" He sprinted after me, young, proud, stupid, raising the crop for another strike. Marzhan burst from the house, eyes wide. "Gaines, stand down." But Gaines was blind with rage. He shoved Marzhan. He actually shoved him. "You've spoiled him. You've forgotten what he is." Every enslaved worker in sight froze. Keller went pale. Even he knew Gaines had crossed a line a man didn't cross and keep his skin. Martian's voice dropped low. "You're fired. Gather your things and leave." Gaines spit at the ground. "You'll regret this. That thing isn't a man, he's a storm. And when he turns on you, don't you dare call it God's will." He left the plantation that same hour, boots pounding the dirt road. But his words stayed behind. And they followed Marzhan everywhere he walked. The journal entry I was never meant to see. That night, after the plantation went quiet, I passed by Martian's study. He didn't close the curtains. He sat hunched over his journal, the same one where he tracked every fight like a farmer tracking livestock. His hand trembled as he wrote. I couldn't read every word, but I saw the start. Gaines was right. I didn't stop walking. But the words sank deep. Not because he feared me. Not because he regretted the deaths. Not because he saw me as dangerous. But because, for the first time, he saw the truth. He couldn't control what he had created. The fight he promised to cancel. 2 days later, he came to my cabin. "The 36th fight is already arranged," he said quietly. "February 2nd. After that, I'll end it. I swear." He looked broken, like a man watching a fire spread through a home he built with his own hands. I tried to cancel. They didn't let me. They threatened my land, my credit, my family. They said I owe them. He swallowed hard. "You don't have to win. Just don't die." I stared at him. He didn't understand. Winning had never been about me. It had been about protecting Dinah, protecting Silas, protecting Marcus, protecting every enslaved soul forced to stand close enough to watch men die in torched circles. If I lost, the punishment would fall on them. "I fight," I said. It was not a choice. It was a sentence. Preparing for the storm. The night before the 36th fight, Dinah came to my cabin. She set a cloth of herbs on the table. Her hands shook, but her voice didn't. "You come back," she whispered. "You hear me? You come back." Silas brought a small carved token, a charm he said kept spirits close. Marcus didn't bring anything except his silence. He just leaned against the doorframe, staring. 3 people. My reason to breathe. My reason to kill. My reason to survive. When they left, I sat alone in the dark. "One fight left," Marzhan said. But I knew better. One fight ends a body. It doesn't end a story. 1851. One fired overseer. One broken promise. One fight that should never have existed. If you saw the storm forming, would you run, or would you walk straight into it? On February 2nd, 1851, the world felt colder than usual. Not the air. Not the wind. Something deeper. A cold that crept from the inside out. The kind of cold that comes when you know your story might end before sunrise. The 36th fight was held on a plantation near Breaux Bridge. Bigger ring. Bigger crowd. Bigger stakes. And a bigger opponent. Goliath. Even his name felt heavy. He stood 6 feet 6 inches, maybe taller. His shoulders looked carved from stone. His arms thick as small trees. He moved like a man built for one purpose. To crush anything that stood in front of him. Planters whispered when they saw him. Some laughed, betting I would fall. Others watched me with tight jaws, as if losing me meant losing something they had built their pride on. Marzhan didn't laugh. He paced behind me, hands shaking as if he already saw the funeral. It doesn't matter if you win, he whispered. Just make it out alive. But he knew I couldn't take that advice. Survival meant winning. Losing meant punishment for the people I cared about. Dinah, Silas, Marcus. Their faces rose in my mind like torches in the dark. Goliath stepped into the ring. Bare chest, knuckles wrapped. Eyes like a man who learned long ago that pain was just another language. The ringmaster lifted his arm. The crowd leaned forward. The night held its breath. And then it began. When the first punch landed, Goliath didn't start slow. He came at me like a charging bull. His first punch hit my shoulder so hard it spun me sideways. His second hit my ribs. The same ribs Cato cracked. And I felt the old wound scream awake. The third punch struck my jaw and sent sparks across my vision. Everything inside me shook. Bang. Eat. A ringing that drowned out the roar of the crowd. I had been hit by strong men before. But never like this. Goliath didn't punch like a fighter. He punched like a hammer. Every blow felt like something inside me was loosening. I staggered. Tried to breathe. Tried to find a rhythm. But he didn't stop. He grabbed my arm and slammed his fist into my stomach. Air left my lungs. The ring spun. My legs almost gave out. The crowd gasped. They could feel it. Tonight might be the night the undefeated falls. Marshan shouted something. I couldn't hear it. My ears throbbed like I was underwater. Goliath lifted his chin slightly. He thought he'd won already. Maybe he should have. What pain teaches. People think pain weakens you. Sometimes it does. But when you've lived the life I lived, pain becomes something else. A teacher. A warning. A memory of all the things you refused to lose. Every punch Goliath threw reminded me why I fought. Dinah's trembling hands when she whispered, "Come back." Silas's carved charm resting warm in my pocket. Marcus's silent eyes watching me walk away. Goliath didn't understand that he wasn't fighting me. He was fighting every reason I had to stay alive. When he swung again, I blocked it with both forearms, absorbing the blow instead of dodging. It hurt. It hurt worse than anything in recent memory. But I stayed standing. His eyes widened for just a moment. A small moment. But enough. I stepped forward. Close enough that the crowd sucked in air. Close enough that he couldn't use his reach. Close enough that every punch I threw landed heavy. I hit his ribs. I hit his jaw. I hit the side of his head. I hit him again and again, forcing his body back, forcing him to feel something he wasn't used to feeling. Being pushed. Being hurt. Being matched. He growled. A low animal sound. And slammed his forearm across my face. My nose cracked. Blood poured hot down my lips. I tasted iron. But I didn't fall. The crowd murmured now, uneasy. This wasn't a normal fight. This was two storms crashing into each other. The longest 42 minutes of my life. Time moved differently in that ring. The first 10 minutes felt like fire. The next 10 felt like drowning. Mist rose from our bodies in the cold air. Mud slapped beneath our feet. Blood mixed with sweat and dirt until the ground looked painted. Goliath hit me again and again. But something had changed. His punches slowed. His breathing grew harsh. His eyes flicked with something I recognized. Doubt. I pressed forward. Pain shot through my ribs. My left eye swelled shut. My hand throbbed like something had snapped inside it. But I didn't back down. 30 minutes. 35 minutes. The crowd had stopped cheering. They were watching history and they knew it. At the 40-minute mark, Goliath swung wide. Too wide. He was tired. More tired than he wanted to admit. I stepped inside his guard. One punch to the ribs. One punch to the jaw. One punch to the temple. He staggered. I could feel the crowd inhale. Waiting. I stepped back only enough to draw breath. Then I hammered the final blow. It landed with that sound I knew too well. The sharp, hollow finality of a skull giving way. Goliath fell to his knees. Tried to rise. And collapsed face first into the mud. That. The words that changed everything. I swayed, barely holding myself up. Blood dripped to the ground. My right hand hung at a wrong angle. Marshan rushed forward, his face white as bone. "We're done," he whispered. "No more fights. Never again." But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking past the crowd, past the torches, past the blood. I knew something he didn't. "One more," I said. My voice came out low, raw but certain. "One more. 37. He stared at me horrified. "Why 37? Why that number?" I met his eyes. "Because that's how many it takes." I didn't explain. Because even I didn't fully understand yet. But I knew this. The final fight wasn't about survival. The final fight wasn't about revenge. The final fight was about truth. 1851. One giant falls. One man refuses to break. One final fight waits in the shadows. If you had survived 36 battles, would you walk toward the last one, or run from fate? After Goliath, the plantation moved like a man with a broken spine. Still functioned. Fields worked, mills turned, orders shouted. But something in its posture changed. Overseers spoke softer when I passed. Enslaved people watched me with a mix of fear and something else. Something brighter. Marshan avoided my eyes. He had promised. We're done. No more fights. I had answered. One more. 37. He didn't understand the number. To him it was madness. To me it felt like a weight inside my chest that wouldn't move. 37. Not 35. Not 40. 37. The number lived in my bones like a drumbeat, steady and low. I didn't know if it came from God, logic, or the slowly breaking mind of a man who had seen too much death. But I knew this. The story wasn't finished. The quiet before the last storm. A few days after the fight with Goliath, letters started arriving again. I saw them in Martian's hands. Thick envelopes. Wax seals. Angry handwriting. Planters who had lost money on Goliath. Men who had bet their pride on seeing me fall. Men who had built their own reputations around being part of the ring. They weren't ready to let it end. He belongs to all of us now, one of them wrote, loud enough for even the enslaved workers to hear. You don't get to just walk away, Marshan. They didn't say my name. They didn't have to. I knew who they meant. A few nights later, I heard two white men arguing outside the big house. You owe us one more, one voice hissed. The people are talking. They want a final show. The sheriff's asking questions. Marshan snapped back. It's not safe. Too many dead. Too many rumors. Another voice answered, smooth and dark. That's exactly why it has to end. One last fight, and then no more problems. No more problems. That's what I was to them now. Not a man. A problem. A problem they planned to solve with a bullet. Patience hears what wasn't meant for her. The plan might have worked. They might have gotten away with it. If not for Patience. She was an enslaved woman from another plantation, brought along to help serve at one of the gatherings. Quiet. Thin. Eyes too old for her young face. People like that hear everything because no one remembers they exist. She'd been pouring drinks, moving between tables when she heard them. Talbot. Crane. A few others. They spoke freely, drunk on liquor and confidence. Ajax will finish him, one said. And if he doesn't, another replied, we've got rifles ready. No way that animal leaves the swamp alive. They laughed. They even joked about how they'd write it down. Died in a fight, poor thing. Wasn't our fault. Just got too violent. Or he slipped. Swamps are dangerous, you know. They weren't just planning to kill me. They were planning to erase me. Patience didn't know me. But she knew what it meant to destroy a story before it started. That night, she risked everything. She slipped a message to her sister on another plantation. Her sister risked a beating to pass it to Dinah during a supply run. Dinah stole a scrap of paper from the kitchen, grabbed a piece of charcoal and wrote with shaking hands. They planned to kill him no matter what happens in the ring. The note. The morning they came for me, the sky was gray and low, like a lid over the land. I was in the stables when Marshan approached. His face looked like he hadn't slept in days. He held that folded paper in his hand. He didn't speak until we were alone. He opened it. Read it again, even though I knew he'd read it 100 times already. Then he handed it to me. I read the words. Slow. Careful. They planned to kill him no matter what happens in the ring. I already knew who him was. I folded the paper once more and gave it back. Is it true? I asked. His eyes flicked away. Yes, he said finally. They've brought extra men. Armed. They're hiding them around the clearing. Even if you win, they plan to shoot you. He wasn't lying. Fear had stripped the lies from him. I expected him to tell me to run. To tell me we could hide. To tell me we'd cancel the fight and disappear into the night. Instead he said, we can leave. Right now. I have money hidden. We take a boat to New Orleans, disappear on a ship. He never looked back. We let the story die here. It was tempting. So tempting my chest ached. Freedom. Escape. A chance to walk away from all of it. But you can't walk away from a story that hasn't finished telling itself. I shook my head. No. He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. No? Samuel, listen to me. They will kill you. I met his eyes. They've been trying to kill all of us since the day they chained us, I said quietly. They just finally decided to aim the gun at me instead of the system. He gripped my arm. Why 37? What does that number even mean to you? I didn't have an answer he would understand. It means this is the last one, I said. One more fight. Then I decide what I am and what I'm not. Silence stretched between us. Finally he let go. If you die, he whispered, this blood is on my hands. I didn't comfort him. It was the swamp. The journey to the last ring began before dawn. The Atchafalaya Basin swallowed us slowly, trees rising from black water, hanging moss like old ghosts watching us pass. The boatmen didn't speak. They rowed through narrow channels only they knew. Birds shrieked and vanished into fog. Alligators slid beneath the surface like scaled shadows. The air was thick and wet. Every breath felt stolen. We reached the clearing mid-morning. Someone had prepared it well. Torches, still unlit, circled a roughly marked ring. Wooden planks lay across the mud for the planters' delicate boots. Boats tied along the bank rocked silently. I stepped onto the wet earth and felt it. This place wasn't meant to hold witnesses. It was meant to hold secrets. 1851. A swamp at the edge of the world. One last ring. One last number. And a plan to bury a man and his story beneath black water. If you knew everyone in power wanted you dead, would you still walk into the circle, or turn and vanish into the fog? The swamp swallowed sound. It swallowed breath. It swallowed fear. By the time we reached the clearing, over 80 white men stood waiting. Planters, gamblers, merchants, and cowards who hid their sins behind fine coats. They didn't cheer when I stepped out of the boat. They didn't laugh like they used to. They watched me with something colder. A mix of rage and desperation, and the quiet hope that today would finally end their problem. Marshan walked behind me like a man walking beside his own coffin. Ajax stood already in the ring. The sun cut across his shoulders, lighting every scar carved into his skin. He was taller than Goliath, broader than Cato, faster than Jupiter. A fighter built by brutality, shaped by cruelty, and trained to kill. But his eyes, that was what struck me. He looked resigned. Not eager. Not bloodthirsty. Just resigned. Like a man who understood the ring was a grave for both of us. The trap around the ring. While the crowd pretended to socialize, my eyes drifted beyond them. To the tree line. To the shadowed roots. To the places where the swamp grows teeth. They thought I wouldn't see them. Men with rifles. Some crouched behind logs. Some perched on wooden planks. Some hiding in the brush with gun barrels glinting between leaves. 3 angles. 3 shots planned. 3 bullets ready to erase me. And every man who held a gun wore the same expression. The expression of someone told. Do it fast. Do it quiet. Make it look like justice. But they forgot one thing. A man who has survived 36 fights doesn't miss details. Especially when those details are meant to kill him. The last warning. Before the fight began, Marshan approached me from behind. His steps were unsteady. He had aged 10 years in one night. They're everywhere, he whispered. I tried to stop it. I tried, Samuel. I didn't answer. What if you refuse? What if you walk away now? We could. I cut him off with a look. You know I can't. He swallowed hard. Why not? Because a story doesn't end until it finishes telling itself. And running is not an ending. When the world went silent, Ajax stepped forward. The ringmaster raised his arm. Fight begins when I lower my. His voice faded into the swamp. All I heard was my heartbeat. All I felt was the ground beneath my feet. All I knew was this. I wouldn't die kneeling. The ringmaster's arm dropped. The world snapped open. Ajax fights like he wants to live. Ajax moved first. Fast, faster than any man that size should be. His fist crashed into my jaw, rattling bone. The second hit drove into my ribs, reopening the crack Cato gave me months ago. The third strike hit my shoulder so hard my arm went numb. Pain flashed white across my vision. He wasn't fighting like a man promised freedom. He wasn't fighting like a man promised rewards. He was fighting like a man trying to delay the inevitable. Like he knew both of us were marked for death. But I didn't step back. Not once. Every hit he landed, I took. Every strike he threw, I absorbed. Because pain doesn't scare me anymore. Death doesn't scare me either. Only failing does. Failing Dinah. Failing Silas. Failing Marcus. Failing the people whose whispered hope somehow became my burden. Ajax hit me again. My head snapped sideways. Blood filled my mouth. The crowd roared, a hungry roar, a sound I'd heard 36 times earlier. But all I heard were footsteps. Soft footsteps. Of enslaved people gathering quietly around the ring's edge. They weren't cheering. They were watching. Watching for the moment everything changed. When I stopped defending. At the 20-minute mark, something inside me broke open. Not a bone. Not a muscle. A feeling. A clarity. I lowered my guard. Ajax struck me across the face with a blow that should have dropped me. I straightened. He punched again. I stepped forward. He punched again. I kept coming. The planters leaned in with wide eyes. They'd seen me strong. They'd seen me brutal. But they'd never seen me unbreakable. Ajax's punches slowed. He realized what was happening. I wasn't blocking. I wasn't dodging. I was absorbing him. Every blow. And pushing closer. When I reached him, I drove my fist into his ribs. The sound was ugly. Wet. Heavy. He gasped. Air fled his lungs. I hit him again. And again. And again. Until the world thinned and the torches blurred and all that existed was two men refusing to die. At minute 33 he swung blindly. I stepped inside and drove one final punch into the side of his skull. The same sound I had heard 36 times before echoed. Hollow. Sure. Final. Ajax went stiff, then fell face first into the mud. Dead. The doctor rushed in. Checked pulse. Shook his head. The crowd erupted. But not in celebration. In panic. Because for the first time they realized, if I could kill every man they sent at me, what else was I capable of? 3 rifles rise. Before the ringmaster could speak, Talbot raised his hand. A signal. 3 rifles lifted from the trees. Aimed at my chest. The air froze. The slaves near the tree line saw it first. And then something happened. Something none of them expected. More than 40 enslaved men stepped forward at the same time. They didn't yell. They didn't raise fists. They just walked between me and the guns. A human shield. A wall of bodies. A message. You want to kill the symbol? You'll have to kill all of us first. The overseers hesitated. Talbot's mouth dropped open. Marshan gasped. And for the first time in their lives, the planters felt powerless. 1851. A swamp. 3 rifles. 1 dead opponent. 40 men stepping forward. If you saw guns pointed at you, would you stand alone or would you let others stand with you? For a moment, nobody moved. 3 rifles pointed at my chest. 40 enslaved men standing between me and death. Dozens of planters frozen, trapped between greed and fear. The swamp held its breath. The men with rifles looked to Talbot, waiting for the order. Talbot stared at me like he was trying to decide if killing me was worth everything it would cost. To him, to his money, to his place in their world. Because killing me meant killing them first. The men in front of me weren't his property. Some belonged to other plantations. Some to powerful men watching from the side. If he fired, he wouldn't just destroy trouble. He'd destroy investments. He'd destroy alliances. He'd create witnesses. And witnesses are dangerous to men who build their lives on secrets. The man who finally spoke. The first voice to cut through the silence wasn't Talbot's. Was Martian's. He stepped between the crowd and the wall of enslaved men, lifting his hands, not in kindness but in something closer to surrender. The fight is over, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Samuel 1. According to the rules we all agreed on. Rules. Funny word in a place like that. Men who broke human beings for profit suddenly cared about rules when it protected their reputation. If anyone spills blood now, Marshan continued, it won't be sport, it'll be theft. You shoot my property, you answer to me and the law. He said property. I didn't flinch. Sometimes you have to let a man use ugly words if it keeps people alive. Several planters shifted uncomfortably. They didn't care about me. They cared about themselves. And Marshan was reminding them that killing me would cost them more than they were willing to pay. One man, Crane Ajax's owner, shouted, "This is madness. He killed my fighter. He's a danger." "So were your fights," Marshan said calmly. "But you didn't complain when you were winning." Talbot's jaw worked. He wanted this to end with my body in that mud. He'd pictured it. He'd planned for it. But even he understood numbers. 3 bullets. 40 men in front of me. Dozens of witnesses. Even if he killed me, he'd set the whole swamp on fire. And fire is hard to put back in a lantern. His hand dropped. "Stand down," he spat. The rifles lowered. The moment passed. The slave men didn't cheer. They didn't smile. They just stepped back in silence. But in that silence, something shifted forever. They had stood between a bullet and a story. And won, leaving the ring. Within an hour, the clearing was almost empty. The planters left in tense groups, voices low, faces tight. Some glared at me like I was a curse they couldn't shake. Others looked shaken, like they'd seen the cracks in the system they thought was solid stone. The enslaved men and women cleaned up quietly, erasing prints, dragging away boards, kicking dirt over blood. They didn't look at me long. But when they did, their eyes said enough. We saw. We'll remember. As Marshan and I prepared to leave, I turned to look at the ring one last time. It was just dirt. But to me it was an altar built for sacrifice. 37 men had fallen there. I had walked out 37 times. How do you carry that? You don't. It carries you. All the way to the end. The cabin at the edge of the world. We traveled back through the swamp in silence. No one spoke. Not the boatman. Not Marshan. Not me. When we reached the plantation, the sky was dark, and the fields glowed with low lantern light. Marshan didn't send me back to the quarters. He took me to a small cabin at the far edge of his land. Far from the big house. Far from the stables. Far from everyone. A doctor came in the night. Broken ribs. Fractured hand. Bruises blooming everywhere. You should be dead, he muttered. I was too tired to answer. Days blurred. Pain. Sleep. Nightmares. I saw every face. Every man who fell. Every eye that turned glassy. Every body carried away. 37 ghosts lining the walls of that small cabin. The papers I didn't take. A week later, Marshan came with a stack of documents. Manumission papers. My freedom. I'm giving you what you earned, he said. No more fights. No more rings. You walk away. Anywhere. North. West. I'll give you money. I'll sign my name. You won't belong to anyone ever again. He meant it. His hands were shaking as he held the papers out. He wanted to feel clean. To stamp redemption over a crime that didn't have that kind of ending. I looked down at the papers. At the signature. At the ink. At the line where my name would finally mean something more than property. Then I asked him the only question that mattered. What about the others? He swallowed. What others? The ones still in chains, I said. On this land. In this parish. In this state. In this country. Does that paper change anything for them? He didn't answer. Because the answer was no. My freedom alone would have been a story he could tell himself at night. I freed the fighter. I did something good. But a single freed man doesn't break a system. I put my hand on the papers. And pushed them back. I'm staying, I said. His eyes widened. Staying? What? You've done enough. You've done more than enough. No, I answered. I won fights. That's not the same as winning freedom. The quiet war. I stayed. But not as property. We never said it out loud. There was no deal. No contract. No written line. But after that day our roles shifted. Marshan still acted like my owner in public. He had to. That was the only way to keep suspicion away. But in the shadows, in the barns, in back rooms, in late-night talks, something else was happening. People started disappearing. Not in the way Goliath or Ajax disappeared. In a different way. A cleaner way. Some enslaved people were suddenly sold to sympathetic buyers, who later set them free. Some were given manumission papers after years of loyal service. Some slipped away in the night with maps no slave should have had, heading north on routes too perfectly planned to be luck. Marshan's plantation became known, quietly, as a place where more people than usual somehow found their way to freedom. He never admitted he helped. I never admitted I planned it. But we both knew. Those 3 years of fights weren't just about blood. They were about learning who owned what. Who owed who. Which sheriff drank too much. Which judge took bribes. Which merchant could be paid to look away. I had turned their rings into classrooms. And now I was using what I'd learned. What 37 really meant. I don't know when exactly I left. The record doesn't show a date. There is no document with my final step on it. One morning I simply walked away. No rope. No chains. No papers. Just a body that had survived 37 battles. And a mind that had seen what the system really feared. Not fists. Not blood. Not strength. Stories. Stories that refused to die. Stories of men who wouldn't break. Stories of people who stepped in front of rifles. Stories of a fighter who killed 37 men not because he wanted to, but because a world built on chains left him no choice. In the years after, I heard that some called me a legend. The Bayou Giant. The Undefeated. Samuel who never fell. Let them. I know the truth. I fell every time I saw another body hit the ground. I fell every time I heard someone sob over a corpse. I fell every time a man I killed whispered his last words against my shoulder. But I also stood. Long enough to help some people get free. Long enough to show others the system wasn't unbreakable. Long enough to prove that even in a world built to crush us, A man could become more than what they wrote beside his name. I killed 37 men. I was never beaten. But that's not the victory that matters. The real victory is this. You're hearing my story. They tried to bury it in the swamp. They failed. Tell me, do you think history remembers the truth or only the stories powerful men allow to live? If you're still here, still listening to a slave's confession from the dark, subscribe, share this story, and leave a comment below. Because every time you say my name out loud, you prove one thing they always feared. Their world ended. Ours did not.